Here we are. So I will start with the background, why we have investigated or done this feature. So as probably you know already, much of the data used in Tacton CPQ is often mastered in some other system, some enterprise systems. And in order to generate correctly quotes and orders, that master data must be accurate and up to date all the time. So if we, for example, have CPQ here in the middle, variants, for example, are typically mastered in PLM. We have pricing data that could be mastered in a price management system. We have images and text mastered in PIM, and currencies and delivery times, and perhaps also pricing or costing is handled in the ERP. So that's a bit about the background. The pain points we can see customers have. The first one is that it's a slow and cumbersome release process of this data, and that will hurt their time to market when they introduce new products or features. And this could lead to an advantage for the competitors if they can go to market in a much faster pace, and that will then lead to lost revenue if the customers or competitors could release features in a faster pace. And the second pain point we have identified is if Tacton CPQ doesn't have the correct product data, for example, it's the correct variance or costing data, quotes and orders will be incorrectly priced. That could result in a lost revenue and decreased margins, and reworks perhaps, and customer complaints in the end. Or the quotes and orders will contain sales items that are wrong, which supply chain cannot deliver on. That will result in costly changes in orders, fault deliveries, and that also will end up in customer complaints and claims. So the big question then is how to continuously keep Tacton CPQ updated with enterprise master data with minimal effort and maximum quality. And of course, the answer is the data import automation function. Use cases for this capability. First one is when customer wants to maintain or update module variants and the feature values from outside the Tacton CPQ, for example, in a PLM system, and release those new variants without going through the CPQ admin release process. Second use case is when they have cost and currency factors or other master data that should be updated directly from, for example, the ERP system without going through the ticketing system in CPQ admin. The third use case is when they have lead times or stock levels on module variants from the ERP. That could be directly going to the CPQ front end, and that could be used then during the configuration phase to select to avoid product variants with long delivery times. I also added a fourth use case, which is perhaps a bit of side effect, but if you have a large amount of data in your administration, for example, if you have a module with 100,000 module variants, you can load these through data import automation instead to get better performance in the CPQ admin environment. So who will be using this new capability? It's mainly for customers that maintain product data outside of, or still want to maintain the product data outside of CPQ, for example in the PLM or ERP, and want to avoid the double maintenance it will make if they maintain the same data in Tacton CPQ administration. It's also for customers that have very high frequency changes to, for example, currency factors, cost or other product data. So for example, if the currency factors changes every day, it will be a huge maintenance process to update them in CPQ admin. But with data import automation, we can automate this. The roles affected with this capability are the CPQ administrators, sales operation administrators, sales enablement administrators. So it's purely an administration function, I'd say.
So thank you so much for that, Robert. And I mean, kind of the use case boils into kind of discussion what it is, right? You kind of explained that from a high level perspective. I'm going to go a little bit deeper and show a little bit in a couple of slides, just explaining to you from a technical aspect what we're talking about. But essentially, what data import automation kind of enables you is a possibility to have a fast track of external data that needs to be pushed into Tacton CPQ. And especially as Robert pointed out, or Rohdin 2 or something like that. I'm not sure what you call you now, Robert, after your confusing name on that screen, said that there are a lot of sources of data that needs to be used in the runtime scenario inside of Tacton CPQ. And PLM and ERP, they're just two of those systems. And sort of one of the kind of the biggest things around this is we have the capability now of bypassing a Tacton CPQ administration ticket, which means that you can release data without any kind of human interaction. But we're going to go into details about that in a couple of seconds. The interesting part here is, of course, because we are always talking about Tacton having a kind of a data-driven approach in a lot of different things, it kind of points out, and we're going to talk about that we are going to populate data into a predefined data structure, which means, of course, the administration portion of configuring Tacton CPQ is still done within a ticket, but the data that should be populating those sets of data can come from an external source. Okay, so let's continue and talk about, okay, what is data import automation? It's kind of a functionality where we can transform, validate, and orchestrate the data from the various sources. So first of all, talking about transforming the data. So every time that we want to get something into data import automation, we create something that we call a package. And that package is an XML format that can be used within data import automation to kind of transform that into the structure that exists in CPQ. It's absolutely validating because what we expect is a full set of data, and if there are data that is not correct, in that case, it's not gonna end up in the front-end environment. And of course, when we're talking about orchestrating, kind of one of the part with data import automation is, of course, that you can decide upon where you want to release stuff and on what kind of schedule. But we're going to look through that a little bit deeper in a couple of slides. All right. So for us to kind of go a little bit visual around this. So, okay, we know that we have data sources, PLM, ERP, or price management, or whatever kind of data that needs to be part of Tacton CPQ. We know that needs to end up in Tacton CPQ because that's the consumer of that sort of information. And as I pointed out previously, what we're usually doing in cases where we want to kind of make some changes into Tacton, we do that through Tacton CPQ administration, and of course with a ticket, because that's the whole concept of being able to make changes, test them out, isolate the changes, and then release that to Tacton CPQ administration. So that still goes on for any kind of structural changes that we want to do inside of Tacton CPQ. But as I pointed out, the data is something that we can see being validated already in one of those external systems. So what we've done now is that we've created a fast track, as I pointed out, that can bypass that CPQ administration portion. But when we take a couple of steps back, talking about the concept of Tacton CPQ and the way how we're looking at product data, for example, we know that there's someone in the PLM system that creates a structure of a product, talking about the different positions, the different variants of that of the specific positions, and how the product is structured. And we want to reuse that and look at that from a Tacton CPQ perspective. We want to do that from a more structural perspective. And of course, what that means is that we want to take parts of that structure and make that available inside of Tacton CPQ. And of course, one of those parts is that we want to add logic on the structure, and that is something that exists in Tacton CPQ. But kind of based on what I said earlier, is that this structure is something that is usually released with kind of really not really that often, which means that the actual things that are changing are the module variants, because you want to release something that is available in a specific new color, or you have a new tire or something like that you want to release. And this is where data import automation comes into play. So kind of what we're saying here is that we know that the ERP and PLM can have various sets of data that needs to be populated inside of Tacton CPQ. And what we're doing here is that we are enabling that with this data import automation functionality by being able to kind of bypass the ticket system that we were talking about previously. So including the module variants from the various systems, importing that into data import automation, run through the transformation, and schedule that for a release. And what kind of data we're talking about here? We have addressed this as master data, because master data is something that usually is maintained in various systems. Master data could be anything as currency, exchange rates, it could be catalog items, could be countries, whatever master data that you've added into Tacton CPQ or configured in Tacton CPQ. It could be direct costs, could be cost elements, so kind of basically building up a structure within Tacton CPQ to kind of reflect the cost structure that you have in your ERP system. Is something that could be done over data input automation. Of course, as I pointed out, module variants are the key elements here when we're talking about product data. It could be things that you want to just update, such as lead time, if you want to kind of reflect the different choices or available variants, or maybe even optimize on the lowest lead time. In that case, what you want to do is that you want to always get that updated. And that's a really good use case for data input automation. It could be other things. I just took weight as an example, but any kind of features or any kind of attributes that you want to populate into the module variants or create new module variants is possible. Of course, you can also go for statuses. So imagine now if you have an item that you want to phase out in your PLM system. Of course, at that point, you can send over a status and make that not available for selection within CPQ. We also have the capability of bringing in assembly variants. So imagine now if you have a specific assembly that has been configured and has been planned in manufacturing, what you can do at that point is that you can kind of send that back into Tacton CPQ and reuse this if you don't want to kind of have kind of redundant work being done later on inside of your ERP system for production planning. So if we take this concept now, like from the aspect of being a little bit like on a high level, I want just to look at how it looks like when you're logging into Tacton CPQ. So this is available if you go into the administration, click on the cogwheel and go to setup. There you have a tab called data input automation. And The concept of data import automation is based on channels. And when I'm talking about a channel means that I have an API that allows me to send in data to that specific channel. It's one of those buckets that we saw in one of the previous slides. And within that, you can decide upon which environment you want to connect this to. So you know that when you got a subscription for Tacton CPQ, you get access to a front-end environment and a test environment, a production and a test environment. So you can have different channels for the different environments. If you want to have test data in your test environment and production data in your production environment. But this is all up to you how you want to set it up. You can have one channel for both if you want to as well. And as I pointed out, you can have multiple channels. So when we're talking about the next part, we got script. The whole idea around this, and this is the transformation part, is that we are going to get the data into Tacton CPQ, the data in the import automation, and that data needs to be mapped into the various sets of data structure that we have in CPQ. So if you just go for the variants in this case, you can see here on the screen that we have, first of all, a couple of filter and select module functionality, but then we have the actual conversion scripts. So when we're going through that specific filter and selection, kind of what we do with the data is that we have the capability to filter out or remove stuff or include stuff depending of the data. We also have a possibility to, based on the data, select which module this data is supposed to be added to. And when we're looking at the scripts down here, you can have a specific set of script logic for every module. So that means that you don't have to have the same attribute names inside of the package that's being sent into Tacton CPQ as the names that you have down in your modules. It's absolutely easier if you try to keep them same name just for like a concept and strategy point of view, so you know that the data is named equally across the solution. So when we're looking at the script is based on our Typix code, which means that it's the same code that is used when you're setting up a calculation, or if you set up one of those Salesforce or the Microsoft Dynamics CRM integrations. What you do is that you're getting in data. In this case, the data is the item, and the item needs to be set to a specific variant. But this is where you can write code to map the various attributes, or if you want to have other sets of logic within here, that's possible as well. And you can do this for every module. If you just keep the code as it is, then this expects you to have the same names of the attributes on the data that comes into data import automation as the attributes that you have on the specific variant. I usually do that way because I think it's easier, and as I pointed out, I would totally recommend to keep the names aligned. Otherwise, you need to find kind of a translation book at some point. What happens with the data when you have gone through the scripts or the transformation is that we are going to get variants as you see in front of you right now listed here, so you can always go in and check if it worked out or if it was some kind of an error kind of transforming one of the modules. And you can see that we have information about statuses. You can see that we managed, in this case, to map 9 out of 9 features. And you can see that we got some direct costs, and of course, when this has changed. And if you click on the data, you can also see the different features and how those were mapped with the data that came in. So this means that you have a capability or a possibility to kind of go through and look at the data even before it's been released to production environment. So when I was talking about the packages previously, of course, the same way here, every time that we are sending in a package from one of the external systems, into Tacton CPQ, you will have a package created, and that's also going to be something that's going to be sent back through that service call as well, or to that API call. So you can always kind of trace and be able to see if there's a specific package that didn't work out, or if when things happen, if there's any need for traceability. And then, of course, it comes to the last point. So we have the capability to schedule the different releases. So you can set up either, as you see here, you can click on a button to just trigger that update. Now, if there's anything that you want to kind of do with outside of the release schedule, you can do that by triggering update now. Otherwise, when we're talking about the schedules, this is where you can set up the various times that you want to release data into the front-end environment. What you can do here is that you can decide upon which of the days that you want to release this. You can decide upon what front-end environment to target, if this is just for the production or for the test environment. You can also decide upon if you want to set up different schedules for different products. And also, as you can see here, you can select the various master data objects as well. So you can have multiple release schedules for the various sets of data, which is really interesting and really powerful. So if we're talking about this, then, I mean, kind of the whole concept that we have talked about now is like we have external systems that want to send in data. We know that the whole aspects of the data input automation is the key for this. Transforming the data and filtering the data, selecting the data, and convert that into the master data and variants. The cool part here is that you can actually test this also in your ticket test environment, so it can be available there as well. But sort of what happens here is that an admin can work and do all these kind of changes inside of the admin, test the data using the data that exists in data input automation, and then ensure that the release works out from a structural point of view, but at the same time getting the data updated from data input automation as well. So this is a really powerful thing, but the key part is that it's released automatically, not needed any kind of human interaction when it gets to the data input automation. So, okay, with every good thing, it comes, of course, a couple of limitations. And one thing that is really important to understand, like the data input automation is for master data and product modeling data. It does not allow you to send in a binary format, so it allows you to kind of master any kind of data tables that includes texts or numbers or something like that. When it gets to the product modeling data, it allows you to handle the model variance, of course, with the feature values. It allows you to handle costs, of course, as I pointed out, and if you want to do like any kind of inventory or stock levels, you can do that as well. That's part of the feature values. It does not support creating new domain elements, which means that when we're talking about a color of something, a color of this coffee cup, if you want to add a new specific color, that means a broader change, which means that someone from an administration side needs to add that as a domain element. And we can't create new modules either. But because as I was talking about this, it's more populating the data into the existing structure rather than kind of changing the structure. As I pointed out, it does not support binary files as it is right now, and kind of typically binary files that we have, there are images, some price data is considered to be binary. Of course, documents and TZX files is absolutely one of the key parts when we're talking about binary files that are not supported. But of course, when you're looking at any kind of binary data, what we can do is that we can use the standard Tacton Administration API and populate that as well. So you can create a ticket and do any kind of modifications needed.
So the value with data import automation, the customer business value is to reduce cost. Since the module variants can be maintained and launched directly from PLM, without duplicate maintenance in CPQ. Second is also reducing cost. It's basically the same, but it's for maintaining master data directly from and launched directly from an ERP without duplicate maintenance in CPQ. It's also reduced cost for volatile data, perhaps even more reduced cost, since we don't have to do this work every day. We also believe that the value is the increased margin. So if we have better control of the cost changes, so that we have the right prices for costs, we will not increase the margin. And finally, the faster time to market. Well, if we can directly introduce new module variants from the PLM, they can go out faster to the end user. And the last one, increased revenue, is, for example, if we can optimize on lead times, we'll create a more attractive offering for the end customer.